Today we're testing two electric bikes for couples. One for him, one for her, but if you're looking for equipment just for yourself, this video will be even more useful. It will help you choose a machine perfectly suited to your needs, because even though both bikes are from the same manufacturer, in reality they're worlds apart. The Engine Pro 3 Zero Boost model is a typical fat bike, which means it has very wide tires, allowing it to be more forgiving off-road and providing much greater comfort on uneven surfaces, including those in the city. Wide tires mean ridiculously good grip and excellent braking, but because of that and the increased weight, it has a slightly shorter range. The higher frame isn't as comfortable as in the other model, but I have to admit, the engine's appearance is really muscular, maybe even aggressive. On the other hand, the L20 model seems almost delicate compared to it, but don't be fooled by its appearance, because it actually hides an even more powerful, yet I emphasize, still legal drive system. Even a person who is 152 cm tall can get on it and ride comfortably. However, the biggest difference between them is hidden deeper, in the drive system itself. One has a hub motor, the other has it in the middle of the frame, and believe me, that really changes a lot. From the way you ride uphill, through gear selection, to how long your chain will last. In this video, I'll break down both designs so you can make an informed decision. We tested both bikes on trails, in parks, on local streets, off-road and on hills, squeezing the last % out of the batteries. We want to answer one but crucial question. Which of these bikes is for you and which are for both of you? This is Powell and you're watching the TechManiac HD channel. Welcome! You can watch this video thanks to the support of the GVG Mall platform. If you're still struggling with that annoying message reminding you to activate, visit the link in the description right now. You'll receive the purchased key within a few minutes, and all you need to do is paste it into the activation settings. This will not only make your copy of the system legitimate, but also allow you to upgrade to Windows 11 without any problems. You can activate and assign the Office suite to your account just as easily, and with the code TMHD you'll get an extra 20% discount, which can increase to 30% during various holidays and events. Stop overpaying and visit the website now. We have several practical tests coming up, but first we need to assemble the bikes. I want to quickly reassure you here. Even if you've never done this before, assembling these two machines won't be a big challenge for an amateur. The engine model manual is in English, but the pictures explain everything. On the other hand, the L20 Pro model came with two booklets, one in English and one in Polish, so I'm convinced that anyone can handle it. We have a lot to discuss here today. After all, these are two completely different models, so I won't dwell too much on the assembly process itself. However, if after watching this video you want to learn more, in the video dedicated to the older L23 Zero Boost model, I show the assembly process in more detail. I'll leave the links in the description, but let's save that for the end. So, let's get to the point and start with the bigger model, which is the Engine Pro 3 Zero Boost. As you can see, this is an absolute tank in this lineup. The tires are 4 inches wide and the frame is cast from an alloy, magnesium alloy. Thanks to this, despite such a massive build, the whole thing weighs, you could say, only 35 kilograms. Alright, compared to regular bikes that's not exactly light, but for a beast like this, capable of handling huge loads, the result is really impressive. And this weight also means stability, which you won't get from any other lightweight bike. The standover height is 68 cm and the frame geometry is designed for people between 165 and 190 cm tall. The declared load capacity is 150 kg. So if you're taller, heavier, or planning to carry a week's worth of groceries in panniers, you're looking at your future bike. Next to it stands the L23 Zero Pro. This model looks like a pallet jack next to a wrestler. The tires are narrower, 3 inches wide, and the frame is set so low that you get on it like a chair, just 38 cm from the ground. The manufacturer states a height range from 155 to 190 cm. This model is made of aluminum, which is an alloy much heavier than the magnesium used in its bigger brother. Although the engine model has more of that real heft, the L20 weighs only 2 kg less, which is just under 33 kg. And don't be fooled by that sleek silhouette. It has the same load capacity as its bigger brother, which is 150 kg. This is by no means a bicycle. The step-through model is a machine for anyone who simply values easy mounting. Both of the models we're testing today came in matte black. Earlier, I tested the older L20 Boost model in the champagne version, and although it's just a subjective feeling, I like that color much more. Black, of course, goes with everything, but the matte finish easily picks up fingerprints and immediately shows road dust. Choosing a color is, of course, a matter of taste, so don't dismiss these machines just because you see them here in black. Besides, the L20 Pro is also available in a champagne shade, and the model engine comes in an interesting midnight blue. Honestly, I think I would probably choose the latter myself. Alright, but let's pause for a moment on height itself, because that's a key factor when buying any bike. You have to remember that the height from the manufacturer's chart is just a starting point, just a rough guideline. What really matters is your leg length and if you can reach the ground from the saddle. See, she can reach the ground. Look at my fiancée. Although she doesn't formally meet this requirement, since she's only 152 cm tall, she gets on and off without any problem at all. Sure, when she's stopped she has to be on her tiptoes, but once she's sitting properly, her riding position is completely comfortable. The seat was set to the absolute minimum for her, and it's worth adding that in this model, you can adjust it not only vertically, but also a few centimeters horizontally, meaning forward and backward. As for me, I'm 178 centimeters tall, and I still have the handlebar height set to the minimum here. On the other hand, in the engine model, I have the seat pulled out only 6 centimeters, but I could extend it up to 22. At least that's where the official numbering on the seat post ends, because the tube itself is even longer. So you can safely assume that the 190 centimeters given by the manufacturer is not really a final limit. Let's examine the tires, because this is where you really see how huge the difference is between the two bikes. In the smaller L20, the recommended pressure is from 1.7 to 3.1 bar. A lighter person can easily aim for the lower value, but since we were testing this model alternately, for safety I inflated it to 2.8 bar. On the other hand, for the wider tires of the massive engine, the manufacturer recommends inflating them to just 1.4 bar. This makes them big, ultra comfortable air cushions, with absolutely gigantic grip. And here, listen, an important note that you won't find in the specifications. The difference comes not only from the width of the tire, but also from its profile, which is the distance from the rim edge to the top of the tread. In the L20, this profile is 7 centimeters, while in the engine it's already 8.5 centimeters. That extra 1.5 centimeters means a much larger air chamber, which physically works for you on every bump. That's why such low pressure is enough in the engine, but technology isn't everything. The 3-inch tires on the L20 still pack plenty of rubber, providing incomparably more comfort than a regular city bike with 28-inch wheels. However, the fat bike phenomenon doesn't come out of nowhere. In my opinion, those 4-inch tires look a bit, well, I have to admit, but in my opinion, silly. I'm not going to hide it, but that's just my subjective opinion. At least that's how it was at first. Because it only takes a moment of riding it to understand that the comfort and fun you get are so great that after a while, the way it looks just stops mattering at all. Someone might be put off by that, but honestly, I have to point out that the tread on both tires is pretty shallow. It's more than enough to shed water on wet asphalt, but it's still tires meant for paved roads and cobblestones. In deep mud, the tread gets clogged instantly, so no off-road craziness. But both tires have something that every cyclist is afraid of. The Kaoyang brand equipped them with a 3mm Kevlar anti-puncture insert, the so-called hyposkin, which in Polish means hippopotamus skin. Broken glass or a sharp stone, well, with such a layer, you really have a lower chance of getting a flat tire. I'm sure you're glad that the tires absorb smaller bumps very well, but in reality, it's the proper suspension that truly determines comfort in the city and on light off-road terrain. And here, both models differ significantly from each other. The front fork travel in the L20 is about 6 centimeters, and the rear shock absorber, well, let me just say this. It's there and it works, but in the footage you can see it barely moves. The bigger brother also has a more robust fork. The travel here is as much as 9 centimeters, and indeed, off-road it totally outclasses the smaller bike, and in the footage it's a pleasure to watch it in action. But let's be realistic, admit it, who really needs that much travel, especially in a city bike? Look, even the shorter fork on the L20, even when riding over grass with my weight on it, handles really well. It absorbs bumps beautifully and greatly increases comfort when riding off-road. Sure, with my 83 kg you can see that sometimes it bottoms out, but that's only in typical off-road situations. But that's with me on board. But in this recording, you can see that a woman weighing over 20 kilograms less than me when riding on grass in the park uses only about 30 to 60 mm of travel. But the front is only half the story. Since the rear suspension in the L20 barely exists, in the engine model this aspect is much better. The rear shock absorber used in this model is much larger and thicker. I have to admit, it was really hard for me to record its movement up close while riding. Even though I tried hard, you can barely see it moving when pedaling. But all I have to do is bounce on the saddle and you can immediately see that this part, well, it's not just here for show. It's also tuned pretty stiff, so even a heavier rider shouldn't be disappointed. And what about the saddle? It's very wide and super soft, but I have to admit, the first day on it wasn't super comfortable. But that's absolutely normal if you haven't ridden for a year and suddenly spent 5 hours on it in one day. After a few such rides, it's fine, and I wouldn't replace it at all. The grips are also nice, soft and comfortable. Let's set aside these technical details for now. Of course, they are very important, but a bike, at least for many of us, is not just a simple means of transportation from point A to B. Many would agree that a day off spent on two wheels is the essence of life. We sit cooped up at home in front of TVs and computers, and when the weather is nice, relaxing on a bike is truly a wonderful thing. Nothing improves your mood like the sun on your skin and a bit of exercise. Riding together is a way to stay active and create new memories. You visit corners of the city you haven't been to before. But even if you're single, a Sunday trip to the park can pleasantly surprise you and help you meet new, interesting people. But before we come back down to earth and take a look at the drivetrains of both models, let us know in the comments which of these two bikes appeals to you more. A massive comfortable tank or maybe a nimble low-slung city bike? Be sure to let us know now, because by the end of the video you might still change your mind. Already left a comment? In that case, it's time to take a look at the hearts of both bikes, meaning the drivetrain. Each bike uses a completely different setup. On one hand, we have a powerful motor hidden in the wheel hub, and on the other, an advanced mid-drive motor that works with the gears. This raises the question, which solution is better? Well, that depends on where and how you're going to ride. But before we get to climbs and Newton meters, let's start with a simple experiment that you can repeat in any bike shop. I lift the rear wheel of the engine model, the one with the hub motor, and spin it. The wheel spins freely, just like on a regular bike. Why is this so important? Well, some of you might remember my test of the powerful Anyoki. That one used direct drive motors. The rotor is rigidly connected to the wheel with no gears at all. The result? Constant magnetic resistance. That bike was braking itself, even with the power off. That's why it was so hard to pedal without assistance. Here, it's completely different. There's a planetary gear with a one-way clutch inside the hub. The motor drives the wheel, yes, but the wheel never drives the motor. The bike just glides, and that's very important. If you've never had an electric bike before, you probably worry that riding it without assistance will be terribly hard. And sure, wider tires and more weight require a bit more pedaling, but thanks to that little clutch, the motor never makes riding harder for you in any way, even when the bike is completely turned off. I mention this for a simple reason, because cheaper or older electric bike designs didn't have this mechanism at all. There, unfortunately, the wheel was constantly braking, which made any pedaling much harder, but here you just roll along like on a regular bike. Now here's the main difference between these two that you likely won't hear about elsewhere on YouTube. Every electric motor has its own preferred narrow RPM range where it works most efficiently. The problem with a hub motor is that it's directly coupled to the wheel. On a steep climb, we ride slowly, so the motor also spins very slowly, far outside its optimal range. It then draws a huge amount of current, but instead of turning that energy into motion, a large part of it turns into heat. And the hub is a small enclosed metal can hidden inside the wheel. That heat simply has nowhere to escape. Imagine you're driving a car uphill in 5th gear, with the tachometer barely showing 1000 RPM. Flooring the gas pedal just floods the combustion chambers with fuel. The engine chokes, vibrates, but not much really happens. The same thing happens with an electric hub motor, which, unlike here, doesn't have additional gears. It only has one. Paradoxically, for a hub motor, slow, exhausting crawling up a steep hill is worse than a dynamic climb with the boost button pressed. Higher speed means higher motor RPM, which is closer to the optimal curve and provides more cooling airflow to the hub. Choking it with low speed on steep, long climbs is the #1 enemy of this type of motor. And this is where the solution from the L20 3.0 Piero model comes in, which has the motor mounted at the crank. This motor doesn't drive the wheel directly, it drives the chain. And that means, well, it uses the gears together with you. You shift to a lower gear going uphill? Great. The motor also gets a lower gear and keeps spinning in its efficient range. That means greater energy efficiency and less heat generated, and even the heat that does build up in this kind of setup quickly spreads through a large section of the aluminum frame, which acts like a huge heat sink for the motor. That's why on long climbs that stretch for kilometers, the mid-drive motor has a real advantage here, especially on those slower ascents. However, it also has a serious drawback, which we'll of course discuss in this video, but what you need to know now is that the two design solutions are simply different and should be used differently. A hub motor handles hills pretty well too, but only as long as you're riding at a reasonable speed. If you crawl up the hill like a turtle, you'll use up a huge amount of energy from the battery. What's worse, if the hill is steep and very long, the temperature of that motor housing will rise dangerously, which can shorten the lifespan of the equipment. That's why it's important to understand these differences. If you go up the same hill at 15 kilometers an hour, even using boost, it'll actually be more energy efficient for the motor and battery, and better for temperatures too. Surprising, isn't it? So if you appreciate me sharing these technical facts and explaining them simply in my videos, please give this video a thumbs up right now. My videos are longer than most others because I make sure that my viewers learn something new with every video. Because we're all here to learn something new. But when talking about climbs, we can't forget to mention torque. The motor has 90 Newton meters of torque. That's a powerful figure, but to make things more interesting, the L20 model generates a massive 100 Newton from its mid-drive motor. And here, right away, a question comes to mind that anyone even slightly familiar with the topic would ask. If both bikes have a sticker on the frame that says 250W and are fully legal according to European Union law, then how on earth do they generate such high torque? A typical 125 only generates 10 to 12 Nm, and here we're talking about an electric bicycle. That's physically impossible. So where's the catch? The answer lies in one word: continuous. 250W is the power that the motor can deliver continuously without overheating and without the risk of burning out the windings. Contrary to what it might seem, the law does not require this to be its maximum power. It's a common myth that comes from the fact that hardly anyone reads the EN 15194 standard all the way through, and it clearly states 250W is the maximum continuous rated power of the motor, and that totally changes things, doesn't it? Take a look at this recording I made on the L20 model. Here I'm riding up a fairly long hill on the 7th hardest gear with the pedal assist set to the highest 5th level. The screen on this model shows the current assist in watts. We can see that this 250 watt motor is actually pumping up to 730 watts into the crank at times. Of course, it all depends on how hard I press on the pedals. I deliberately didn't press super hard, so I wouldn't go over 25 km/h because that's when the assist cuts off. But I can tell you that this model can support the rider on climbs with more than 800 watts of power. Shocking, right? And it's 100% legal in Poland, just like everywhere else in Europe. That's exactly why those 100 Nm are achievable. With 250 watts it would be bogus, but with over 800 it's definitely not. However, remember that this power is only available for short bursts, for example, when you're starting off at a traffic light or, like here, attacking a steep climb. You can only maintain that kind of power for a few dozen seconds before the controller cuts it off for safety. And according to the regulations, the power is completely cut off after exceeding 25 km/h. But what then? Does the motor completely limit us and we can't go any faster than that? Well, no. A lock at 25 km/h would be totally absurd. It's just the point from which we're relying solely on our own muscle power. If someone has serious power in their legs, the law doesn't forbid them from breaking a sweat. In this recording, you can see that I started pedaling harder and instantly broke the 25 km/h barrier riding a bit over 30 km/h on flat ground. And downhill? Well, going downhill will easily accelerate to much higher speeds. On the L20 Pro, I managed to get just under 50 km/h, but above that, it just lacks a higher gear. It's also worth noting that both machines deliver power through excellent, precise torque sensors located in the crank. If you press lightly, they move gently. If you push harder on the pedal, they surge forward. You may have encountered this before, but cheap or older electric bikes often work in a simple on-off manner. You start pedaling, and the bike suddenly takes off as if someone floored the gas pedal. It's really annoying and honestly makes no sense in city traffic. Here, that problem doesn't exist at all. Of course, for these bikes to be fully legal, they can't have any kind of throttle either. The only allowed way to get them moving is by turning the pedal crank, although the same law allows for one exception, the so-called walk mode. We hold down the minus button on the handlebar and slowly, really very gently, the bike starts to accelerate by itself up to about 5 km/h. You can walk like this and comfortably talk next to someone walking, but this mode is also useful in other situations, for example, when we want to push a heavy, loaded bike with groceries up a hill, or when we're pushing it out of the basement or pulling it up the stairs. Now, let's talk about something that seems totally abstract to many first-time e-bike buyers. After all, it's an e-bike, right? The motor does the work on its own, so why would we need any gears? Many people think they're just here for decoration. It turns out, however, that this is actually one of the most important components of the entire drivetrain, and using it on an electric bike is quite different from using it on a regular bike than you might think. Earlier, I asked you to write in the comments which of these two appeals to you more, which one you would choose for yourself, right? So let me tell you, this part of the video might totally change your perspective. As you know, the mid-drive motor in the L20 transmits all its power through the chain and gears. And which derailleur did Engwe install here? Shimano Tournai, the cheapest and most basic model in their entire lineup. And here's where the engineering problem lies. The Tournai is a mechanism designed for city bikes powered solely by human leg strength. It is designed to handle the loads generated by the muscles of a typical cyclist, which is around 20, maybe 30 Newton meters, while the motor in this model can hit it with a torque of 100 Newton meters. And add to that what comes from your legs, so that's an additional 20 or 30 Newton meters. It turns out that this derailleur has to handle a force 4 to 5 times greater than what it was designed for. That's basically a recipe for disaster. You've likely shifted gears under full load while standing on the pedals climbing a hill. You can do that once or twice until you learn, but it's obvious that it's not good for the chain or the gears. If someone shifts gears while climbing hills using strong support from the electric motor, the snapping of the chain and the grinding of the gears will be heard from a mile away. And the strain on the bike? Guaranteed. If this is your first e-bike with a mid-drive motor, the next 40 seconds will save your drivetrain and hundreds of zlotys in repair costs. Rule number 1. Shift down before the climb, not during it. See a hill ahead? Shift gears in advance while the chain is only lightly loaded. And what if the climb surprises you and you're already going uphill in too heavy a gear? That's when plan B comes into play. Pedal harder for a few seconds to gain a bit of momentum, and then, using that momentum, almost completely ease off the pressure on the pedals. Keep pedaling, but very lightly, just enough for the mechanism to move, and that's when you change gears. The chain will shift smoothly, without any clatter or banging. After a few tries, you'll definitely get the hang of it. See? This problem affects the L20 model, and even though the Engine Pro 3.0 Boost has exactly the same Shimano components, it doesn't have this problem at all. The motor is in the hub, so it drives the rear wheel directly, completely bypassing the chain. The bike will shoot forward regardless of the gear you're in, and the drivetrain will forgive almost any mistake. It's the opposite with the L20 model. Your strength and the motor's power are combined on the same chain, so if you pedal hard and charge up hills, the factory drivetrain will wear out in no time. I'll sum up exactly who should choose which model and why at the end of the video. However, if you already know that the L20 is your favorite and you plan to ride hard, in the description and pinned comment I've linked reinforced chains and more durable alternatives that are worth installing during your first service. But before we move on to the next tests, I want to explain to you why I'm going into so much detail about these technical aspects. The reason is that I want you to still feel great about your equipment a year, 2, or even 5 years from now. An electric bike isn't a one-time purchase, it's something that's meant to give you joy for many years to come, and it's even better when you can share that joy with someone close to you. When I was a kid, I used to ride dozens, if not hundreds of kilometers every week. Today, even though I'm older, my fitness is still pretty good, but I'll tell you that a few years ago we rented bikes in the mountains and my fiancé managed to ride 500 meters, after which it just wasn't possible to go any further. The bike was too heavy, the climbs were too steep, and the difference in our fitness levels meant that instead of a shared adventure, there was only disappointment, returning the rented bikes, and that was the end of the fun. I'm bringing up this story because I know how it goes. The fact that you're at different fitness levels doesn't have to mean you can't spend time together on bikes. The L20 model, with its powerful torque, low step-through, and super easy operation, meant that together we could ride over 30 kilometers a day, relaxed and without stress. And even bigger hills, instead of being an unpleasant experience, brought us both joy. The biggest advantage of an electric bike is that it evens out the difference in fitness levels. No one gets left behind, no one has to wait for anyone, and no one comes home disappointed. And that's exactly what all those Newton meters, gears, and watts are for. So you can just ride together. But before you set out on long rides together, you have to face the most important number for every e-bike. Battery range, because on paper everything looks great, but in real life only one thing matters. Will you make it home, or will you end up pushing your bike uphill? First, let's take a look at these two 48-volt batteries. You might assume they come from the same manufacturer, but they don't. The engine model is equipped with a battery made by LG. Meanwhile, the L20 frame houses cells produced by Samsung. In theory, the difference is supposedly small, especially since both have a nominal capacity of around 720 watt-hours. Well, with a slight difference, LG allows for a slightly larger margin of error. Samsung guarantees that even a weaker unit has at least 705 watt-hours. LG allows units with as little as 686 watt-hours. If you're feeling confused here, let me quickly explain that battery capacity is not the same as the capacity of a water bottle. Here, it depends on the chemistry and the reaction of the metals, so every battery will always differ a bit in capacity. It's the same with your smartphones. You might get a unit that has 5 watt-hours less than the average spec. Your friend with the same phone, even bought in the same store, might actually have a capacity that's 5 watt-hours higher. It just depends on what you get. With such big batteries, a few watt-hours more or less is totally standard. If you didn't know about this, let me know in the comments. Anyway, the differences in batteries aren't just about the guaranteed minimum capacity. Both have a different BMS system that monitors voltages and temperatures, which actually changes the way the bike can deliver power to the motor. That's why it's time to sum up how far these machines can actually go. Let's start with the engine model.
Moment of truth. There's 1 bar left on the battery. I'm shifting into 5th gear. The odometer shows 83 kilometers covered. I'm riding in 5th gear. The hill is pretty steep. I don't know the percentage, maybe 20. Between 15 and 20, of course, you can't really see that on camera. But there's still power all the time. 1, even though it stayed. Yeah, it's harder. Let's add some boost. Well, the boost has already faded, I'd say. But just a moment ago when I was riding uphill, I had 3% because I'm doing laps here. It definitely helped a lot. Well, I see that I'll probably have to switch to the 3rd gear. It's much easier. I'm keeping boost on the whole time. And now we're at 0%, but it still helps. I can even feel and hear it. So it's good to be close to home. There's still assist. Nice.
On the manufacturer's website, we can read that depending on the assist mode we use, the bike can go 80 to 130 kilometers. But below, we can see that the measurements were taken with a 75 kg load. Together with my backpack, water for both of us, and recording equipment, I have about 12 kg more. And even though I used level 1 most of the time on flat terrain, I really didn't hold back on the boost button when accelerating. On the climbs, I also set the 3rd or even 5th level of assistance, just to experience that power. And let's not ignore the fact that for all the other tests, I also did a lot of totally silly, unnecessary climbs up steep, unpaved hills just to have fun and go wild. I also rode a few kilometers on such unpaved terrain, and not on beaten paths, but like a complete idiot, I waded through deep grass that drains energy from the battery 10 times more than riding on smooth asphalt. So yes, in short, I'm definitely satisfied with the result of 84 kilometers. If I hadn't ridden like a total nut, accelerating for no reason and wasting energy just to speed up and brake again, even with my weight and extra load, I might have managed a dozen or so more kilometers. And what about the L20 model? This one is lighter and has thinner tires inflated to a higher pressure, which automatically increases the range, so to see how much I managed to get out of it, just check out this footage from the ride.
Now we're doing an end of battery test for the L20 model. Same hill, here it's already showing 6%, but I'm shifting to 5th gear. Of course there's no boost, and it's really damn hard. Let's shift, let's speed up. Let's shift, assist. I can hear that it's still subtle, but it's there just a little. At this point, I'd say 6% is basically the end of the battery, whereas the engine model, as you just saw, was still running even at 0%. So you could say that's it. Oh, now I think it has completely disconnected. Well, I think I'm about to stop. Even though it's in 1st gear, well, it's the end. At 6%, you could say it's basically gone. Unless maybe the motor overheated, but I doubt it. No, I don't think so. Oh my. I'm about to run out of breath. No, I can still ride up that hill myself. It's a pity there's no lower gear. But there's definitely no charge left either. At 5, I have to stop again. So 5 is where it ends. But still, listen, how much is it? 112 kilometers. And I'll cover about 30 kilometers of that. The rest, my fiance. So I officially declare that this battery is done.
But actually, over 80 kilometers of that distance was driven by my fiancée. She's over 20 kilograms lighter than me. Even though she used the 3rd level of support most of the time, I think the L20 still came out on top over that distance. But you're probably wondering, what's the deal with this battery level? Why did the LG battery keep supplying juice to the motor even when its level was practically 0, while the Samsung goes out of commission even when it still has 6% left? Let me tell you more. The L20 model with the Samsung battery slightly reduces the level of support as soon as the battery drops below 20%. Very subtly, but still. LG and Samsung have entirely different philosophies on cell protection. Samsung's battery management system does everything it can to minimize cell degradation, and generally speaking, just like with your phone battery, you shouldn't discharge these below 20 or 30% either. It's just that the battery wears out and ages faster then. That's why Samsung's BMS, or battery management system, doesn't care at all whether we're being chased by a pack of angry dogs. Simply going below that charge level is not welcome. So Samsung gradually reduces the amount of energy delivered to the motor and reserves the last 5 or 6% for the battery's health. LG, in the larger model, approaches this completely differently. It gives power right up to the end, even at the expense of cell health. Which approach is better? Well, from a purely technological point of view, Samsung is absolutely right here, but if you happen to be in need, such a conservative policy can be a bit frustrating. And which battery would you prefer? Write in the comments. You don't necessarily need a key to remove both batteries, but pay attention to the ports themselves. In the L20, it's located low behind the front wheel, and this rubber cap is mostly for show. If we don't make sure it's seated properly, water and mud can get in there when it rains. There shouldn't be a problem with the engine. The charging port is positioned high, and the cap itself is definitely much sturdier. I also noticed some subtle differences during charging. When charging the LG battery from 0, the power draw from the socket started at around 370 W. After 45 minutes, it increased to 403 W. After an hour, it dropped to 23 W. And in the final phase of charging, the power was significantly reduced. This is standard overcharge protection for the cells. The whole process took exactly 2 hours and 10 minutes. The charger drew a total of 760 Wh from the socket, and that makes perfect sense because to the nominal 720 Wh in the battery, you have to add the losses of the charger itself, which are generated as heat during such a fast charging mode. The L20 was charged from the remaining 5%. It took 2 hours and 12 minutes to reach 100%. The charger drew exactly 710 Wh from the socket. The process took a bit longer than with its bigger brother, even with 5% still remaining because Samsung reduces the power much earlier and more drastically in the final phase than the electronics in LG. This is again due to cell protection and longer lifespan. As I mentioned before, it's best to charge such batteries from around 20 to 30% up to about 80%, just like with smartphones. Even if you think that the folding option for the bike isn't necessary for you, I advise you to think about it once again. Maybe right now you don't plan to travel by car with your bike, or with both of them, but once you start enjoying riding, you might actually feel like putting your bikes in the trunk and taking them to the mountains or to the seaside, because after all, why not? Thanks to the folding frame, you can fit your bikes even into a small, compact car with folding seats, but I want to emphasize that this will probably only work with a 3- or 5-door car. It might not work with a sedan. There's no need to worry that the bikes will fold up on their own while you're riding. In both models, you first have to unlock the mechanism with a slider. It's the same for the frame as it is for the handlebars. It folds to the side at an angle so the front wheel stays straight. The only thing that will stick out are the pedals. It's a pity that these don't fold, but you can unscrew them in a minute. Folding it is an extremely simple process. Here in the video, you can see my first attempt with the engine model. You can tell it's going just as you'd expect for a first try. I also forgot about the kickstand, but even so, it only took a moment and the bike was already folded. And of course the handlebar. And now we have a bike that would fit even in a tiny car trunk. Unfolding it is even easier. Handlebar, click and pull the bike out. Then lock the tension and you're ready to ride. And it literally takes just a few seconds. In a comprehensive review, we can't skip discussing the brakes, and about these, I can say they're damn good. Both got two 180 minute discs. Hydraulic brakes instead of cable-actuated ones mean excellent modulation. You can feel when the pads touch the disc under your finger and control the force, similar to using a car's brake pedal. I never squeezed the front brake all the way because even with such thick tires, it would have ended up locking the wheel. But the brake light won't surprise anyone here because it's supposed to work, but sometimes it just doesn't. At first, I got the impression that something was wrong with it, because sometimes it turns on and sometimes it doesn't. I think anyone would consider this a defect, but my friends, nothing could be further from the truth. It turns out the brake light doesn't react in a simple on-off way when you press the lever. The built-in accelerometer constantly measures speed and only turns on the light when you're actually slowing down. If you're going downhill with the brakes slightly pressed, but you're maintaining a constant speed, the light won't turn on at all, and as you can see in this footage in the forest, when going uphill, the light suddenly turns on. And that's not because the brake was pressed, but because the bike physically slowed down on the climb. Brilliant, isn't it? If you think so too, let me know in the comments. As for the braking tests, I didn't bother with any super precise measurements because a lot depends on skill, confidence, and most importantly, the rider's weight. A person weighing 60 kilograms will have a much shorter stopping distance than someone weighing over 100. One thing is certain, the wider tire on the engine has more grip, but even the 3-inch one on the L20 sticks to the road incredibly well. While testing the engine at 25 km/h, I squeezed the brakes before the sign. I locked up the rear wheel and the stopping distance was about 2.5 bike lengths. In the L20 test, the stopping distance is shorter, probably because I didn't hold back on the front brake. I squeezed it so hard that it actually lifted the rear of the bike. That shows how powerful these brakes are. My everyday advice, apply them carefully, especially in the wet. Your physical safety is one thing, but what about the safety of the bike itself? What if a random passerby likes the look of your bike parked outside a store? The most basic protection against theft is, of course, a lock. I've left links to some interesting ones at various price points in the description of this video. But, as we all know, there's no metal or lock that can't be cut or opened. That's why everyone who didn't do any research before turning on this video will soon fall to their knees in disbelief. What you saw here in both models, that thing that sometimes blinks red, is a built-in GPS tracker. Yes, you heard that right. To put it simply, there's an eSIM card in the frame, which allows the bike to read its position from satellites and report it through the 4G network straight to your app. It's a much better solution than trackers like AirTag, which need other people's smartphones nearby with location sharing enabled. Does it work? Let's take a look. Thanks to the GPS, of course, it's easy to find the bike. We can see our location here on the map. We can see where the bike is. The bike is, of course, turned off. This GPS module works all the time. It doesn't use much power because the battery is huge. We can see that we're coming around the corner. And that's where the bike is. Here, of course, I showed you how it works from about 100 meters away from the bike, but don't worry, you can even be on another continent. It doesn't make any difference. Funny enough, you can even unlock and lock the bike remotely through the 4G network. Do you see this in the app? I'm far away from the bike. Here it shows disconnect, meaning there's no Bluetooth connection, yet I can still unlock the bike. I can't switch the lights or the assist level though. No, for that I would have to be close to the bike, but I can turn it off and lock it again remotely. I think everyone would agree that this is a great solution, but not everything that glitters is gold. The GPS works in open areas. In the basement, not so much. Fortunately, in the app you will see the bike's last known location. And if someone stole it and is keeping it on their property or in a house, I suppose that having such evidence in the form of the last position, the police could help you with that. But if the thief took the bike to a multi-story apartment building, it might be difficult to determine exactly which apartment the bike is currently in. Unless the police already know someone with a lengthy criminal record in that building, and if not, I guess you just have to wait until someone comes out with it or catch the culprit somewhere else. And although it's a rather weak scenario, it's still better than not knowing at all what happened and where your property is. The second drawback is the price. The price of the annual subscription for this service. After all, the bike has cellular data transmission turned on 24 hours a day, and this service is provided by local operators. Of course, Engwe acts as an intermediary here and has contracts in place no matter where you are. Before you get upset, let me tell you that the manufacturer fully covers the cost of the first year. This free year starts from the moment the bike is first registered in the app. Yes, he didn't have to pay anything, and as you can see, I have the service valid from June 19, 2026 to June 19, 2027 because that's when he activated both bikes. If after that time you decide that you like the service and want to extend it, it costs 39 euros per year. Is that a lot or a little? Well, that really depends on you. On one hand, if a theft actually happens, it gives you the option to track the bike, but this service can also be useful if the bike is being used by a child. Simply, instead of calling and worrying, you can check where the bike is currently located. Even if your partner or spouse rides a bike to work, what if, knock on wood, there's a traffic accident? Then those 14 zlotys a month just for peace of mind might be worth it. It's an undeniable fact that GPS itself doesn't directly protect anyone from theft, but an alarm and an unlock code probably do. At least it should, because unfortunately I have to admit that the alarm on both bikes isn't really impressive. Just take a look at this recording. We can see that at this moment the bike is turned on. I can press the lock button, so now we can see that it has turned off. And the alarm is also armed, because if we go into the app settings, here we can see the information that auto unlock is disabled. At this moment, I have intentionally activated the movement alarm after locking, which means the alarm will go off after we touch it. Now I'll put the phone away and you'll see that I'll try to move it and what will happen then. There was a sound signal and a red light was blinking here. Meanwhile, on the phone, we got a notification saying that movement has been detected on your e-bike. Movement, so check what's happening with it immediately. A single sound signal like that obviously won't impress anyone enough to leave the bike alone. Of course, we have this notification on the phone, we have navigation, we have GPS, but at this point we can also set an unlock password here. We can change it, we can turn it off. Let's say we set a password, a simple password. We press done, and the password has been set. We'll see after turning it off and on what happens, how it works when you enter it then. Yes, you can see exactly, the bike won't go anywhere. No changes will be made until we enter the password. You enter the password with the plus sign. The letter I is next, 1, 2, 3. 4. And only at this point will we be able to start the bike. So, in case of any theft, it's worth setting it up. Entering the code may seem annoying, but in the app, you can set it so the code isn't required when you are within Bluetooth range, so it makes sense. In my opinion, that's already a huge plus, and this option gives you a powerful extra layer of protection, because there's no way a thief could unlink it from your account or reset the password on their own. According to information from users and Engwe support, the manufacturer requires the original proof of purchase to clear the GPS module and remove the lock. As long as the thief doesn't steal your bike along with the invoice, it basically becomes a brick with a built-in GPS tracker, which can't be legally or safely resold, or even linked to the app on a new phone. All of this makes stealing this bike not only very difficult, but actually pointless. The thief can't start it or sell it, and because of the built-in GPS, at best he can only ride it by himself in the basement. It's absolutely fantastic, so now you'll probably be more willing to leave it outside the store, at work, or by your apartment building, but a bike left out in the open will get dusty, dirty, and wet. That's why in the video description I've left a link to something I personally consider absolutely essential. It's a waterproof nylon cover with drawstrings that during the season protects 1 or even 2 bikes at the same time from city dust, rain, and wind. Thanks to this, outside of the season, I can safely keep the folded bikes on the balcony where they don't bother anyone. Just remember one thing, it's a good idea to remove the batteries during this time. At the beginning of this video, I asked you to write in the comments which of these 2 models appeals to you the most. I'm curious if you've changed your mind so far, or maybe you're even more undecided now. Even if you already have your favorite, please stay with me for a moment and let me share my point of view. Because even though I wanted to show you both models as thoroughly as possible in this video, the best way to judge is to ride them yourself. After spending a dozen or so hours on each of them, and I'm afraid I can recommend one of them much more than the other. Earlier you heard from me that I just don't like the Engine Pro 3.0 boost, at least visually. The aggressive look of the frame and the really thick tires in my eyes are just a bit too much. On top of that, the high step-over is much less comfortable than what the much sleeker L20 model offers. But in my opinion, it's the engine model that wins this comparison, and that's the one I would absolutely recommend to anyone who meets the minimum height requirement of 165 cm. Why? Well, it's simple. This bike is more comfortable to ride. The riding position just suits me much better. The wide tires and better suspension noticeably increase comfort, and thanks to the hub motor, I'm not worried about breaking the chain or quickly wearing out the gears. After riding it, the fact that I don't like how it looks stopped mattering to me at all. It's funny because I didn't share my personal feelings with my son, but he also said that the engine model looks over the top, and at first he didn't like it either. Despite that, we went for a 25-kilometer ride on these bikes. Here's a recording after 20 kilometers, and you can see he doesn't look tired or bored. He said that the bike is great and it's much better to ride than he initially expected. I know not everyone will agree with my opinion, but here it is. Even if you're looking for 2 bikes for a couple, the initial assumption that the engine model will be best for him and the L20 for her might not be accurate at all. I'll boldly say that even for a woman, at least one who meets the height requirement, the engine will also be a better choice. I know it looks gaudy and might not appeal to all women at first, but with Benkit, it suits both him and her, and the comfort of those wide tires and better suspension outweighs how the bike looks. Honestly, once you ride it, how it looks stops mattering completely. The price of both, at least for now, is exactly the same. What's more, in the description you'll also find a discount coupon that will let you save 10%, which is actually around 700 zlotys on each bike you buy. If you decide to go for it, in my opinion, it's worth spending that money on fuel to take these bikes to the mountains or to the seaside. You'll also have enough left to buy a decent lock and even extend the bike tracking service for a few years. It's also worth mentioning that both bikes came to me from Warsaw, and even though I live in Ireland, I received them about 4 days after placing the order. But what about the L20 3.0 Pro model? In my opinion, the engine model is a better choice, but this one also gets the job done. After all, it's more powerful. It has a mid-drive motor, which has its advantages, but also some disadvantages that I mentioned earlier. If you're under 165 cm tall, you might feel like you don't have any other choice. But what would your favorite channel, Techmaniac HD, the one you're definitely subscribed to, be if it didn't give you some great alternative? That's why if the low standover height and the overall shape of the L20 3.0 Pro are still more important to you, but the mid-drive motor just doesn't convince you, then choose the L20 3.0 Boost instead. It's almost the same, but with a hub motor. Yes, there's already a dedicated video about this model on my channel. The link is in your top right corner or in the description below. Honestly though, I have to admit it's not as powerful as the Pro version. It also doesn't have GPS and the battery is a bit smaller, but on the other hand, it's about 1,200 PLN cheaper. If you found this material helpful, leave a like and a comment, because it really helps a channel like mine. Also, check out my website www.techmaniahd.pl, where thanks to the intuitive menu, you'll easily find more content. See you in the next one. Bye.